All right. It's kind of late. I don't really want to turn my guitar amps on tonight, so I'm just going to get right into the philosophy. But there's going to be some exciting improvisation at the end of this video involving philosophy, and you'll see what I mean when I get there. But yeah, let's just jump right in. So Epictetus was born in Hierapolis, Greece in the 50s. When I say the 50s, I don't mean the 1950s. I mean the actual 50s, like 50 AD. He was at one point a slave of an administrator in the court of the Roman Emperor Nero. He then studied the philosophical tradition of Stoicism. He was freed from slavery, and then he became an influential Stoic philosopher and teacher himself. Now, although we don't have access to any texts written by Epictetus, his student, named Arrian, wrote down many of his ideas in two texts. There was the Discourses of Epictetus and the Enchiridion of Epictetus. The Enchiridion is a much shorter work, and it's essentially a manual for living according to Epictetus' teachings in particular and Stoicism in general. In this video, I'm going to be doing two things. The first thing I will do is present just a general overview of the philosophy of Stoicism, focusing particular on Epictetus' version of Stoicism. Since there's a resurgence of interest in Stoicism these days, my hope is that this introduction is going to help some of you start your own journey towards learning about Stoicism and applying it to your own lives. This overview is going to be a summary of and a supplemental companion piece to, really, the recommended overview text for the lecture on Epictetus. And this is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy article on Epictetus by Margaret Graver. So after the overview, what I'm going to be doing is improvising. And what I mean by this is I'll take a look at some passages from Epictetus' Enchiridion, and we'll talk about them. My reason for focusing on the Enchiridion in this video is that I want you to have access to Epictetus' lessons for how to live a good life. Because after all, this unit is on the meaning of life. So we're going to talk about living a good life. I want you to definitely read the whole thing. So read the whole Enchiridion this week, but hold on to your copy afterwards because it contains a valuable approach to living a good life that you're going to need to practice during the easy times so that you know it well enough to draw from it during the hard times. So let's begin by just asking what, according to Epictetus, we are. What am I? What are you? Well, you and I are human beings, and what is distinctive about human beings, according to Epictetus, is that we are both rational and mortal. It should be pretty clear what it means to say that we're mortal. You're going to die. I am too. We're all going to die. Now, when Epictetus says that we are rational, here's what he means by that. Dogs, cats, and pigs share with us an ability to form impressions of the world and navigate it on the basis of those impressions. When my dog Pansy hears a sound at the door, she's pretty good at locating where the sound is coming from, and she can use her voice by barking to let me know that she thinks someone is at the door. That being said, there is a special sense in which she is unable to evaluate whether the beliefs suggested by her observations are true or false. She cannot evaluate whether a set of beliefs that she holds is logically consistent. Now, here's what I mean when I say that. If I listen and I hear what sounds like a knock at the door, I can ask myself, is there someone really at the door? Suppose I hear the knock during the middle of the night, or before I do that, suppose I hear it in the middle of the afternoon, it's a bright, warm, dry day. Under those circumstances, it's plausible that someone really is knocking at my door. That said, suppose that I hear a single knock during a windy storm in the middle of the night. I check my security camera, and I don't see anyone outside. In this situation, I perceive a conflict between the belief I inferred from my impression, the belief was that someone is knocking at my door, and the other things I believe. So what I can do, and what Pansy really can't do, is to evaluate the truth of the belief that someone is knocking at my door by evaluating it from the perspective of my other beliefs. My security camera shows that nobody is at my door. It is too late for it to be reasonable for me to expect someone to come to my house. It's too windy for it to be likely that someone is coming to my house. Let's imagine a really bad windstorm. And also, the wind is likely to have picked up my branch and picked up a branch from my yard and just flung it against my door. So Epictetus goes further than to simply say that we have the ability to reject beliefs that are contradicted by our evidence. And in fact, he thinks that we are unable to believe what we see is false, and that we detest being deceived. Once you show me that I have been deceived into thinking that the sound of the branch hitting my door was a person knocking, I can't go back to believing what I now know to be false. God, or Zeus, has an important place in Epictetus' worldview. According to Epictetus, the world is orderly, and Zeus designed it and is kind of an administrator over it. He administrates over the world. One similarity between ourselves and Zeus is that we are all rational. We can make choices in our own lives in a way that is analogous to how Zeus made choices about how the universe was organized. When Epictetus talks about making choices, he has something very specific in mind. I can make choices about what to believe because I can ask whether the beliefs suggested by my impressions withstand scrutiny from the other beliefs that I know are true. So just think back to the story of the knocking at the door during a windy night. I can also make choices about what to pursue. For example, I can choose to pursue becoming a marathon runner. And I can make choices about the attitudes I take towards the events that happen in my life. For example, I can feel devastated by an unsuccessful job search, or I can experience it as the next step along a journey that can lead somewhere valuable. Importantly, though, it's not up to me whether I actually become a marathon runner, nor is it up to me whether a job is offered by someone else to me. I don't have ultimate control over whether my body gets sick, my possessions break, or are burned in an unexpected fire, my friends abandon me, my philosophy papers get published, or the world turns against me and I become universally despised. Those things are external to me. Now, there are things that I can do that may play a role in the process that leads to those outcomes, but ultimately whether or not they happen is not up to me. So at this point, we're now ready to introduce Epictetus' prescription for how to live a good life. What we need to do, according to Epictetus, is to become virtuous. And what it means to become virtuous is, to quote Graver, not only act correctly and on the basis of knowledge, but also recognize our kinship to God and witness with joy God's orderly management of the universe. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. I like having money in my bank account, but money is only good conditionally. It's a useful thing to have if, like me, you want to buy a new microphone, such as the Octava MC012. But money can be a bad thing if I use it to hurt other people or myself through excessive partying or activities that destroy the natural environment. And for this reason, if I think that money is good unconditionally, I'm making a mistake. I also like being alive. However, it's not true that it is unconditionally good for me to be alive. When we see my life and my death within the larger context of an orderly universe constructed according to God's design, suddenly it's not so obvious that my life is unconditionally good. Perhaps it's just part of the design of the universe that I will die saving the life of someone else. Or even that eternal life on earth would be its own kind of hell. So when interacting with things that are not unconditionally good, so when we're interacting with money, with health, with real estate, Epictetus is not telling you to use them haphazardly or to ignore them. It's fine to show up to work, put in an effort, love your family, and etc. You're allowed to pursue those activities seriously. But here's what he's saying. He's saying that at least two things is true about them. So first of all, what belongs to you is the fact that you are pursuing them rather than whether you accomplish them. And you shouldn't think that these external things are unconditionally good. Now, once we give up on the idea that these externals are unconditionally good, we can start to form a different attitude towards life. Anxiety, fear, envy, and even the pain of unrequited love all come from the false belief that happiness will come from externals and that you must control them. If you correct this belief and you realize that the only things that belong to you are the things over which you can make a choice, your attitudes, your beliefs, and your pursuits, then you will achieve confidence and you will be at peace. Now, there's a lot more we could say about Epictetus, but I think we've reached a point where we're ready to transition to working through some passages in the Enchiridion. Now, as I mentioned, I haven't actually planned out this part of my lecture, so we're going to be doing this together. You're going to see what happens when I improvise in real time without a plan. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick some of the sections that have spoken to me over the years, and I'm going to talk about them. All right. So I'm going to start with the first section of the Enchiridion. We'll go through it paragraph by paragraph. So it goes like this. There are things which are within our power, and there are things which are beyond our power. Within our power are opinion, aim, desire, aversion, and in one word, whatever affairs are our own. Beyond our power are body, property, reputation, office, and in one word, whatever are not properly our own affairs. So already what we can see is Epictetus making this distinction between what is ours and what isn't. So, yeah. I'm not going to go into that more because we just talked about it. Next paragraph. Now, the things within our power are by nature free, unrestricted, unhindered. But those beyond our power are weak, dependent, restricted, alien. Remember then that if you attribute freedom to things by nature dependent, and take what belongs to others for your own, you will be hindered, you will lament, you will be disturbed, you will find fault both with gods and men. But if you take for your own only that which is your own, and view what belongs to others just as it really is, then no one will ever compel you, no one will restrict you, you will find fault with no one, you will accuse no one, you will do nothing against your will, no one will hurt you, you will not have an enemy, nor will you suffer any harm. So what he's saying there is, once you've made this distinction between the things that are yours and the things that don't belong to you, your life's going to go a lot better if you can keep that distinction in mind and not confuse the categories. So if we're just focusing on the things that are within my power, we're focusing on my attitudes, my beliefs, my pursuits, what we can experience is some real freedom, because I get to decide whether I pursue writing a good lecture video. I get to decide whether I pursue working out. I get to decide whether I pursue relationships that are meaningful to me. And that's free. That's something that nobody can take away from me. Nobody can hinder that. But if I attribute freedom to things that are by nature dependent and take what belongs to others for my own, I'm going to be hindered. So if I imagine that getting a particular job or getting a particular time in a race or hitting a particular note on the mandolin belongs to me, all of a sudden I'm weak. because there's somebody else who can take that away from me. There's environmental conditions that can play a role in whether or not I achieve it. So now I make myself weak by pretending that something that is not my own is my own. So let's go on. Aiming therefore at such great things, remember that you must not allow yourself any inclination, however slight, towards the attainment of the others, but that you must entirely quit some of them, and for the present postpone the rest. If you would have these, and possess power and wealth likewise, you may miss the latter in seeking the former, and you will certainly fail of that by which alone happiness and freedom are procured. So what I see Epictetus doing here is saying, like, if you want to become virtuous, if you want to become happy, you want to become free, like, you gotta stop like pretending that things that don't belong to you are yours. You gotta quit some of those practices right away. Seek at once, therefore, to be able to say to every unpleasing semblance, you are but a semblance and by no means the real thing. And then examine it by those rules which you have, and first and chiefly by this, whether it concerns the things which are within our own power or those which are not. And if it concerns anything beyond our power, be prepared to say that it is nothing to you. All right, so what he's saying here is that when you are walking around the world and you experience something unpleasant, so let's say I walk outside, I step in a puddle, and I get all wet. What I can say to that is, you're but a semblance, and by no means the real thing. So we're going to learn a little bit about this later. But the point is that I can ask, is the fact that I'm wet something that belongs to me? Or is that something that, like, belongs to something else, that somebody else has control over, that it's a function of the natural environment, and that I don't have ultimate control over it? And we'll see it's the latter. And when I find that an unpleasant experience that I would call unpleasant is not something that I have control over, not something that belongs to me, but is actually an external, I need to be prepared to say, well, it's nothing to me. It doesn't belong to me. So let's keep going. We can go on to number 2. Remember that desire demands the attainment of that of which you are desirous, and aversion demands the avoidance of that to which you are averse. That he who fails of the object of his desires is disappointed, and he who incurs the object of his aversion is wretched. If then you shun only those undesirable things which you can control, you will never incur anything which you shun. But if you shun sickness or death or poverty, you will run the risk of wretchedness. Remove the habit of aversion, then, from all things that are not within our power, and apply it to things undesirable which are within our power. But for the present, altogether restrain desire. For if you desire any of the things not within our own power, you must necessarily be disappointed. You are not yet secure of those which are within our power, and so are legitimate objects of desire. Where it is practically necessary for you to pursue or avoid anything, do this with discretion and gentleness and moderation. All right, so there's a couple things going on here. I'm going to break it up into 2 parts. So first of all, what Epictetus is saying is that if you feel desire, what you're doing is you're demanding the attainment of that which you desire. And if you feel aversion, what you're doing is you are demanding the avoidance of that which you feel aversion towards. So if I want a piece of chocolate, I am demanding, like, I'm moving towards the chocolate. I'm willing a world where I have the chocolate. When I feel aversion, I'm willing a world where I don't see the spider that perhaps I'm afraid of. Now, what Epictetus says then is, if you can make it so that you only desire things that are within your control, and you only have aversion for things that are within your control, then you're good to go, because you're never going to experience the things that, like, you're never going to have to face the things that you have aversion towards, and you're always going to get your desires satisfied. And so like, if what I desire is to pursue running, that's something that I can do. I can do my best to move towards running. If I desire to take a particular attitude towards the water that's splashed on me in the puddle, from the example that I used when I was talking about the last section. That's something that I have control over. I can change my attitude. And if I feel aversion towards, like, if I feel aversion towards feeling fear when I see a spider, I can put in the work to change my attitude towards spiders, right? So what I might do is pursue a path where I don't feel aversion anymore, so I can change my attitudes. But if what I'm, anyways, the point I'm making here is that you're good to go if you can just feel a desire and aversion over things that you have control over, because then you have control over whether you achieve the object of your desire and avoid the things that you feel aversion towards. Now, Epictetus was a great teacher, and I think that this second part of this section shows that. So he says, "But for the present, altogether restrained desire, for if you desire any of the things not within our own power, you must necessarily be disappointed, and you are not yet secure of those which are within our power, and so are legitimate objects of desire." So what he's saying is you're not ready yet. You probably aren't capable yet of neatly distinguishing between the things that are within your control and the things that aren't within your control. And so you're going to desire the wrong stuff if you try this too early. If you try to practice the art of desiring things that are within your control, you might get it wrong and you'll be disappointed. So he's saying that, if you can, like, try not to desire anything right now, like restrained desire. And where you need to desire something, do it with discretion, gentleness, and moderation. So instead of going like hardcore about, desiring some new attractive person you meet, for instance, or this like cake that you want to eat, or this world record that you want to break. Like, if you have to desire some of those things, if you can't avoid it, do your best to make your desires feel moderate, to make them feel gentle. All right, let's go on to the next one. Number 4. I love this one. When you set about any action, remind yourself of what nature the action is. If you're going to bathe, represent to yourself the incidents usual in the bath. Some persons pouring out, others pushing in, others scolding, others pilfering. And thus you will more safely go about this action. If you say to yourself, I will now go to bathe and keep my own will in harmony with nature. And so with regard to every other action. For thus if any impediment arises in bathing, you will be able to say, it was not only to bathe that I desired, but to keep my will in harmony with nature. And I shall not keep it thus, if I am out of humor at things that happen. All right, so when he's talking about bathing, he's not talking about like the way that you and I might bathe. Like you might go to your bathtub and bathe. I usually take showers in my house, but I suppose I could fill up my bathtub and use that. What Epictetus is talking about are these giant like communal like bath places where you'd all go and like get clean together and talk and hang out and all that. And what he's talking about is how when you go to the public bath, there's people who are going to, some people will splash you. Some people will like scold you. Some are going to steal your stuff. And when you go to bathe, what you need to do is you need to think, okay, what's the totality of the situation that I'm entering? Like if you represent to yourself the bath as simply a place where you're going to go in and splash around and get clean and have some fun, you're not doing a good job of like seeing the entirety of the situation, because the entirety of the situation involves the annoyances too. And once you do that, what you can do is say, I'm choosing to go into the bath knowing that there's all these other things happening in the bath that I'm going to find annoying. And now your goal is not simply to go into the bath and do bath stuff, like get clean and, have fun or whatever. It's also to keep your mind in a state conformable to nature while you do it. And so he says, I will now go to bathe and keep my own will in harmony with nature. And so with regard to every other action. And so the way you do that is you don't get out of humor at things that happen. And so this is something that you can do when you're driving in the car. What he's saying is that instead of thinking of your commute as a time when you get into the car and you have a smooth ride there and nothing happens, think of it as a situation where some people are going to honk, some people are going to drive slow, some people are going to drive reckless. You might get stuck behind a train. Like there's all these things that happen. And your intention needs to be not simply to get from point A to point B, but to get from point A to point B while keeping your mind in a state conformable to nature. And what this means is that you're going to think about these things that would be considered annoyances as things that are nothing to you because they're not within your control. Okay? What's in your control is the attitude that you take towards them. So that's what he's saying in number 4. Let's go to number 7. Yeah, this one always speaks to me. So, as in a voyage, when the ship is at anchor, if you go on to get water, you may amuse yourself with picking up a shellfish or a truffle in your way. But your thoughts ought to be bent towards the ship and perpetually attentive, lest the captain should call. And then you must leave these things, that you may not have to be carried on board the vessel, bound like a sheep. Thus, likewise in life, if instead of a truffle or shellfish, such a thing as a wife or a child be granted to you, there's no objection. But if the captain calls, run to the ship, leaving all these things behind. Leave all these things, never look behind. But if you are old, never go far from the ship, lest you should be missing when called for. All right, so this one's kind of wild. So the idea, like the image is like you're on a ship, you go to shore. It's totally fine to go down there and like pick up some shells and look for truffles or whatever else you want to do. But don't stray too far, because when the captain calls, you gotta go back to the ship. And if you're still like holding on to all your stuff, you're going to go back on the ship, but they're going to like tie you up and force you back on. You're going to go back on the ship bound. What he's saying is that in your life, there's nothing wrong with going out and, playing the financial game, getting a job, getting married, having kids. Like that's fine. You can do all that. But you're going to die. And when the captain calls, you can't cling to the things that you found in life. You can't cling onto them and say, I'm not letting go of them. Because if you do that, it's not going to change the fact that you're going to die. It just means that, to paraphrase Tennessee Williams, you're going to go howling into the night like a wild beast. And it's much better to live and die in a way where your mind is in a state conformable to nature. But yeah, super wild one. Let's go on to number 10. Upon every accident, remember to turn toward yourself and inquire what faculty you have for its use. If you encounter a handsome person, you will find continence the faculty needed. If pain, then fortitude. If reviling, then patience. And when thus habituated, the phenomena of existence will not overwhelm you. All right. Pretty simple. You're going out in life, you're looking around, you experience something, and every time you experience some new thing, like you see somebody really hot, you you get punched in the face, you feel disgust, you're in traffic, and you're impatient. You should think of that as the curriculum that life is giving you. So all of those things are opportunities that you're being given to practice particular faculties. And so you encounter the really hot person, like continence is the faculty that you get to train now. Pain, so you get punched in the face. Fortitude. Probably punch in the face isn't the best example, but maybe you slip on the ice and you hurt yourself. So fortitude. You're feeling disgust, or you're in traffic and you're really impatient. Well, patience, right? So if you can keep doing that, if you can see all these things that happen to you in your life as opportunities to practice particular faculties, then you're doing a good job of taking the curriculum of life. And at the end of it, what's going to happen is that You're going to get to a place where the phenomena of existence no longer overwhelm you. And so I think we're beginning to see how this approach to life is going to lead you to a place of peace and tranquility. All right, let's go on to, I believe this is number 19. Yeah. You can be unconquerable if you enter into no combat in which it is not your own power to conquer. When, therefore, you see anyone eminent in honors or power, or in high esteem, or in any other account, take heed not to be bewildered by appearances and to pronounce him happy. For if the essence of good consists in things within our power, there will be no room for envy or emulation. But for your part, do not desire to be a general or a senator or a consul, but to be free. And the only way to this is a disregard of things which lie not within our power. Okay. So if you go around picking fights that you can lose, you're gonna be conquerable. And in terms of the Stoic approach to life, the pursuits that you have control over are things like what you pursue, you know, your attitudes that you take towards things. But if you start envying people who have like these positions in life, like they're a CEO or they're a tenure track philosophy professor or they're a Formula One race car driver, whatever it is you're into, you're making yourself weak and conquerable, right? You're desiring the wrong things. What you need to be desiring is to be free. And the way that you can be free is by training yourself to only desire the things over which you have control. Let's go on to number, let's look at this one. If you are dazzled by the semblance of any promised pleasure, guard yourself against being bewildered by it, but let the affair await your leisure, and procure yourself some delay. Then bring to your mind both points of time, that in which you shall enjoy the pleasure, and that in which you will repent and reproach yourself after you have enjoyed it. And set before you, in opposition to these, how you will rejoice and applaud yourself if you abstain. And even though it should appear to you a seasonable gratification, take heed that its enticements and allurements and seductions may not subdue you, but set in opposition to this how much better it is to be conscious of having gained so great a victory. Okay. So imagine that you're thinking about just going out and doing a night of just indulging and just wild partying and drug use. What Epictetus is doing is he's giving you he's trying to teach you to form an attitude towards that promised pleasure. So the first thing he's saying to do is imagine both 2 points of time. One thing he wants you to imagine is a point of time where you're enjoying the pleasure. Another point of time is the morning after. You have a horrible hangover. Maybe you got sick. Like there's all sorts of maybe you've regrets. You've lost a lot of money. Maybe you've done permanent brain damage. Like put both of those things like in there. So you've, on the one hand, you're thinking about the pleasure. On the other hand, you're thinking about how you'll feel afterwards. And then he's saying that in addition to those two representations, he wants you to represent a world, like he wants you to represent what it looks like where you abstain from the pleasure. So he says, and set before you in opposition to these, how you will rejoice and applaud yourself if you abstain. So it's like, think about how much you'll celebrate yourself if you can hold off on pursuing the pleasure. And then also, like, going through that path from extreme pleasure to pain the next day. Right, and then he's saying that when you do this, you'll be able to be conscious of having gained a great victory. Okay, so again, what he's trying to do is to get us to take a more moderate, measured, gentle approach to the promised pleasures in life that we feel pulled towards. All right, let's go on. Okay, I want to read this one. This is 13 or 14. If you wish your children and your wife and your friends to live forever, you are foolish, for you wish things to be in your power which are not so, and which belong to others to be your own. So likewise, if you wish your servant to be without fault, you are foolish, for you wish vice not to be vice, but something else. But if you wish not to be disappointed in your desires, that is in your own power. Exercise therefore what is in your power. A man's master is he who is able to confer or remove whatever that man seeks or shuns. Whoever then would be free, let him wish nothing, let him decline nothing, which depends on others, else he must necessarily be a slave. So this is really powerful. What this is saying is that the second that you wish or demand that somebody else does something, that your servant does a good job, that your students produce great work, or that your teacher makes a specific kind of video, you now become dependent on them. You make yourself, in his words, a slave to the person from whom you're wishing something. And what Epictetus is saying is that instead of doing that, what you should do is only desire the things of which you have control. Okay, so let's go down now to. So this one's, I think, really powerful for our current age, when there's a lot of nastiness going on the internet. When any person does ill by you or speaks ill of you, remember that he acts or speaks from an impression that it is right for him to do so. Now it is not possible he should follow what appears right to you, but only what appears so to himself. Therefore, if he judges from false appearances, he is the person hurt, since he too is the person deceived. For if anyone takes a true proposition to be false, the proposition is not hurt, but only the man is deceived. Setting out then from these principles, you will meekly bear with a person who reviles you, for you will say upon every occasion, it seems so to him. All right, so somebody says something nasty to you, or either to your face, behind your back, whatever. What you can think about is like, okay, well, that's how it looks from his perspective or her perspective. And she's not going to see my perspective. And so what I need to do is think, when I hear, maybe you're an idiot, you can think, okay, well, so it seems to her. And then you can just think of the world as being one where that person is deceived about you. Okay? And so it needn't, as long as you know that you're doing what you need to be doing, it doesn't, you don't need to internalize what other people are saying about you. What you can do instead is just say, okay, in this state of affairs, this person has this belief, so it seemed to him. Hopefully that makes sense. And I want to conclude with this final one. So this is XLV. Does anyone bathe hastily? Do not say he does it ill, but hastily. Does anyone drink much wine? Do not say that he does ill, but that he drinks a great deal. For unless you perfectly understand his motives, how should you know if he acts ill? Thus you will not risk yielding to any appearances, but such as you fully comprehend. All right, so what's going on with this one is he's saying that when you see somebody else do something, it's better to form it's better to represent what they're doing in your mind based on a description of what they're doing rather than a judgment about it. And so if I see somebody drinking a lot of wine, what I can think is that they just drank 2 liters of wine or whatever. Because I don't know what's going on in their life, and I also don't know how their drinking fits into the general plan for the universe. I'm not saying I endorse this general plan for the universe, but I'm saying that this is Epictetus' view, and this is the advice he's given you. So what he's saying is, you don't know how what they're doing fits into a general plan. And you also don't know, why they're doing what they're doing. So instead of saying, that person is talking too loud, or that person is drinking too much wine, or they're doing those things in a way that is bad, or they have a bad attitude towards drinking. What instead I want you to do is to withhold judgment about that, and instead just describe the facts that you're seeing. Just describe what you're observing. All right. So that's all I'm going to talk about tonight. So we've done a brief overview of the Enchiridion of Epictetus. And then I just took a look at some of my favorite passages from the Enchiridion, and we talked about some ways of interpreting through the lens of Epictetus' Stoic philosophy, and we talked about some ways of applying it to your life.